Inshallah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I do see that there is a line indicating that that's where we left off at, so I'm just going to go over. Inshallah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and let's go over some of the things right there that we had done before. So we were at this ayah, ثم آتينا موسى الكتاب تماما على الذي أحسن وتفصيلا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة لعلهم بلقاء ربهم يؤمنون. And we said the word thumma, all right, and when we looked at thumma, but one thing I forgot to mention, let's go over it just a little bit. Okay, so we said the ayah that was before it is وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ, that this is my path or my straight path, so follow it. And we talked about فَاتَّبِعُوهُ, and we talked about the shadda. The shadda, which is this number upside down 3, and we said this would indicate either a gradual process or the type of consistency, or this may indicate a repetition. Okay, so وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ, do not follow the different paths, and we talked about the different types of different paths, and we did like the different, well, we looked over, not that we did it, but we looked over the different diagrams that the Prophet ﷺ had drawn before, and we talked about those. فَتَفَرَّقَ بِكُمْ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ, and so because what you want to avoid is that that the path that you would be following would take you away and distance you from the straight path. So we said it would be exactly like this. We said it would be like as if you're drawing a straight line and then you're drawing too many lines out there, and those lines, although from afar they may seem like, well, they're not too far away from the straight line, but without you realizing, these straight lines, each one would actually be taking you to a completely different ending. It would take you to a different path. It would take you to a different ending. And certainly it would not lead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's definitely going to a different direction. This is going to the direction basically of the straight path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we said the word sirati can be metaphorically to actually give us like an image, a visual diagram that it's going to a certain direction, where it's the direction to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala versus all the different paths going away from the direction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what you want to think about these lines, away from the direction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore they could be given different isms. It could be Judaism, it could be Christianity, it could be feminism, atheism, existentialism, whatever, Buddhism, whatever it is, that would, for some, it may seem that, yeah, there are some things that are similar. And that's one thing I would like to say, is that when we speak about different attempts to bring some kind of dialogue, the interfaith talks. I used to join a lot of these interfaith talks. Remember, I was a lecturer at the Swedish Theological Institute, so I'm very familiar with interfaith talks because I was part of it for a very long time. But one thing I will say about interfaith talks is that what is, let's say, in the background of all these interfaith talks is, number one, the superiority of secularism without us realizing. So they would, let's say, talk about, let's say, women in different religions. You would come in speaking about, let's say, Islam, and the other person speaking about Judaism, or, Judaism or Christianity or whatever it is. But there's always that the superiority of the Western/liberal culture, that all these religions are basically assuming and coming from the premise that right now that women are living their best life, for example, or human rights, that there's a specific definition, and that definition is already set at whether the United Nations already set by the Western culture, already set by the culture that we are assuming is superior, which is today. And then, of course, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever, group is coming in that's talking or presenting their own faith, they would come in and say, well, see, it's really similar to what we have today. Therefore, we're just basically up to date with our one, either with the evolution of where the religion is at, or two, telling you that the religion itself not necessarily evolved to, let's say, accepting the secular culture, but it is basically that way and has been that way. And then they'll cherry pick and be very selective from different texts or different interpretations in order to prove that it's up to date and that it can blend with the Western culture that is basically considered as superior. So that's number one. The best situations that I can never forget. I think I mentioned that story. I could never forget that story, man. The best situations are the situations that they'll be really deliberate about the additions that they are doing to their own scripture. I remember at the Swedish Theological Institute, I think her name was Dr. Amy Berg something. She was she was a female rabbi. In other words, just by the word female rabbi tells you that she was a Reformed Jew. And I was supposed to be a representative on the Islamic faith, basically. And there was another Swedish woman that was a PhD in theology, and forgot what her name was. Their names are different. And the Jewish rabbi, she basically said, well, at one point in my early childhood, we were told that women cannot join the yeshivas, which is a religious school, a religious Jewish school, and that they were not supposed to be reading and studying the Bible, the Torah, and the Talmud. And right now, because we know a lot about religion, and because we know a lot about what God wants of us, so we basically just needed to make a new Torah. That's exactly what she said. She said, we made a new Torah. But I guess I was the youngest, and I was still, I guess, in my early stages of understanding the world. I thought people were always in search of truth and not making up truth, but I was very innocent. And I said, you made a new Torah? You actually made a new Torah? And then she said, isn't that nice? And then I looked at the audience, and they were a large crowd. And I said, did you actually hear that? She said she made a new Torah. And then the MC said, Miss Wazwaz, please respect other people's faith. Please, um, you just have to, just accept that other people have a different way of uh, introducing and interpreting faith. So, but she said she made a new Torah. And I just had to just stay quiet later on because it was something that they are right there announcing and really happy about it and being so I guess so proud and no, not even be not even what is the word that I could say? It's not like something that they're not open about. No, they are open about it. This isn't all the Jews. This is a Reformed Jew. I'm sure the Orthodox Jews would definitely say this is not acceptable and consider her, just a heretic. But at the end is that you will see some will basically tell you, yes, we had developed and we're so smart and we can right now bring a new Torah. Well, I mean, guess what? I actually thought that that was the case only with that particular Jew, but I discovered that we even have Muslims that are pretty much doing the same. But of course, I guess they couldn't go as far as making a new Quran per se, because we have a lot of Hafidhin, and you've got enough Somalis to actually tell them, wait a minute, you actually made a big mistake right there. So go back, and you can't make that. You just have the Somalis, forget the Egyptians and their Hafid. Just take the Somalis, that's enough for you to actually to actually tell you that there رواه جمع عن جمع عن جمع إلى منتهى من غير شذوذ ولا علة قادحة. That's enough for you to actually know that there were enough hufaz to tell you that you really had gone wrong with your attempt to make a new Quran. Anyhow, so they would actually do something very similar. You would have even some of the Muslims do something very similar, which is bring a completely new interpretation to the Quran. It's not very different from what that lady was saying, what that lady was doing. So just keeping in mind, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا, there's one straight path, and in order to make sure that you're on the Sirat Mustaqim, you definitely need to get that ilm. By getting that ilm, you're then guaranteeing, one, the reference itself to the interpretation for that reference is basically going back all the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as described and as basically explained by the Prophet ﷺ himself. Okay, ذَلِكُمْ وَصَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You want to make sure, so you've got two things. Yes, you've got the reference to the right interpretation, and three, you want to make sure you put in the implementation. So you've got to make sure that you put in the practice, and that's why he said لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. But the word thumma, I think we didn't actually go in details with the word thumma, so I just want to let you, just kind of get a just glimpse of some of those things that you would see. For example, the word thumma. We would just, get a translation. We got these translations for we got the translations for the different Quranic translations, and we had seen that some of them would say, well, thumma is to mean then, or is it thumma to mean, are we talking about a chronology, or are we talking about a new situation, or are we talking about a completely beginning of a complete story? So when you're talking about thumma atayna Musa al-kitaba tamaman, then Prophet Musa alayhi salam got the revelation basically. But is this تماما على الذي أحسن وتفصيلا? So was there a certain, let's call it a certain revelation to put, I guess, the people, and to put the people perhaps on a certain type of discipline, and which basically right there, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. So was this kind of like the 10 Commandments that came first? Were the 10 Commandments laid out first, and then after they would apply the 10 Commandments, then after that they perhaps got the revelation, which is the Torah? Was that the case? Well, that was one of the interpretations. So first got the 10 Commandments as pretty much, a direction for them, and then got the revelation, which basically is the Torah, and basically had the details of within the Torah. Is that what it is? So that was one interpretation, because remember, the first part of it, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ, and basically these are the 10 Commandments. If you were to count them, let's say, what do you count them into? Let's see right there. We're just going to go over it really quick and see. Well, we actually get 10 Commandments, okay? Let's see. Here we go. تعالوا أتلوا ما حرم ربكم عليكم. Here's number one. ألا تشركوا به شيئا. So do not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبالوالدين إحسانا, and treat your parents with kindness. لا تقتلوا أولادكم من إملاق. So number three, do not kill your own children. Here's number three. And لا تقربوا الفواحش, do not approach or do not engage in any type of sin. So we're looking at, well, I mean, can we consider that as one, or to commandments. I mean, we'll see. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Do not kill, basically, the innocent souls. And لَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ. Do not take the goods and basically the property of the orphans. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ. And when you basically engage in transaction, it must be in justice and, of course, equal, whether we're speaking about weight or whether we're speaking about amount. لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا. And if you speak, you would speak in justice. In other words, you would not lie. So here's number 8, وَبِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ أَوْفُوا. And be committed to basically the commandments of the Lord Almighty. Okay, so you could say what we have here, 7, 8. وَلَوْ كَانَ ذَا قُرْبَى وَبِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ أَوْفُوا. That would be 9. So making this one would actually be 4 and 5 together. لَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشِ. That would be do not approach sins, whether we're speaking about the apparent sins, or here that would be 4 and 5. Okay, that would be, and also the hidden sins. Okay, hidden sins like envy, like hate, all of that. So those would be the 10 commandments right there. Okay, and then وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمًا. So once they basically applied the 10 commandments, that's when they got the Torah. So that was the first interpretation. Second interpretation said not necessarily as the interpretation of thumma, and they said, well, thumma has multiple meanings. It can mean a chronology. It can also mean as a stage. So a stage that once they were at this stage, then basically another stage later on developed in giving them new stages of scripture, basically. But I thought it would be a good idea to have you see some of the interpretations of Thumma, just so that we could see just a taste of Lugha Arabiya. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write there, just, I know here we go. There was that split right there. I got that good translation for you, so it can be something that you could actually see, and I'll have that Arabi and the English side of it. Okay, so now you see the different meanings for Thumma. And of course, we usually just think of Thumma as, translated then, or perhaps, and so forth, or sometimes even think of it as giving me a reasoning for something, but thought it would be a good idea to see some of the most important meanings for thumma. So the first one is a tartib ma'a tarahi, which basically gives me a sequence with a delay. Now, when you say a sequence with a delay, you're basically comparing it to the letter fa, for example. So the letter fa, there's no delay. If I were to say hanya thumma Jarai came over, that would basically suggest that that Hania came, and perhaps maybe half an hour later, Jarai came. Okay, but if I were to say Jarai Mas'uda, so then I would say, well, Jarai came in, and right instantly, Mas'uda came right after. In fact, I didn't even close the door. She came right after. So that would be the difference between a thumma and a fa. So if I were to say فَمَسْعُودَ, etc. Okay, so now we get an idea of that delay piece of it. Versus thumma, like I said, there could be a delay in time, and also there could be a delay perhaps maybe in the sequence as well, if there is somewhat of, let's say, a longer time to it. Well, that's not the only thing. Let's see with this ayah right there, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically says ثُمَّ أَمَاتَهُ فَأَقْبَرَهُ ثُمَّ إِذَا شَاءَ أَنشَرَهُ. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would put him to death, and then فَأَقْبَرَهُ. And I want you to look at this one. This was actually a really good example, because let's see it right there. ثُمَّ أَمَاتَهُ فَأَقْبَرَهُ. Of course, when you basically are alive, okay, then you're not going to die right away because there's a time lapse. So that's why he said ثم أماته. Then the person would basically later die, and you could say that's basically telling me a sequence with a delay. But the word فأقبره, right after the person is dead, then they're basically going to be buried. Okay, so that's why that fa. Now you could say the thumma is different than the fa. ثم إذا شاء أنشره, and certainly just because you were buried, it doesn't mean that you're going to go to resurrection right away. And there's that thumma right there to tell you and then give you that indication that there was a time lapse. Okay, so let me just make sure you're seeing what I want you to see. Okay, here we go. Let's move on right there. Then you've got the other thumma, which basically would tell me, yes, there's a sequence, but somewhat of not necessarily a time or a chronology in time, but you could say that this is talking about a different type of a stage. So it's more of a rhetorical rank-based sequence and not necessarily something that has to do with time. Okay, so just keep that one in mind, that we're talking about a rank right there. ثم كان من الذين آمنوا. So does that mean that this is talking about a time lapse, a chronology, or no, this is actually rhetorical, and it's telling me that there's a different kind of a sequence. It's talking about a rank. It's talking about importance. So now you could see the second one. Let's look at the third one, which basically is telling me that there's a discourse marker. This is telling me that there's a somewhat of a transition right there. And certainly when you're talking about a transition, you're talking about a transition basically to emphasize a new statement and without implying necessarily sequence. So perhaps that this one right there is one of the interpretations for the thumma that we basically talked about. So let's look at this. So the first interpretation that scholars have basically implied in the ayah, which we were talking about, ثُمَّ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ. So the first one was basically within this thumma, that there's a certain time lapse later on after basically the revelation of the 10 Commandments. Then later on they got the revelation of the Torah. The second one, the second opinion, they looked at it that no, this is basically talking about a rank, perhaps maybe a different rank with those that had improved. And this would basically also be, let's look at it. We're going to take that A again and actually see it. We're going to be jumping a little bit. Okay, so basically right there, this would basically tell me if we're talking about a rank, ثُمَّ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ تَمَامًا. So the scholars that said that this was talking about a rank, they said, well, تَمَامًا عَلَى الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ. So for those that had lived up to a certain rank, those that had made it to perhaps the better discipline, perhaps lived into the ability to be righteous, then those were the people that basically had the revelation come to them because they were at a better rank. So they basically got that revelation after basically excelling in being committed to the 10 Commandments. Okay, so that was the second opinion, or at least the second interpretation coming from that piece of it. And of course, then you've got ثم الاستئناف والانتقال. Then you have the other type, which basically is telling me a transition. So in that story, if we are to basically say that it was a transition, then we would look at this one and basically telling me, well, they're then transitioned from this 10 Commandments basically being the beginning of that education of their religion to then later on going into a new transition of they had a new application to implement in their life, a new application, a new education to learn, a new application to basically starts. And now you're looking at as a discourse, as a marker, and as a transition right there. Let's look at another interpretation of thumma that we're speaking about. Number one, just a simple addition. So we're talking about no tempo. It's not for any type of a chronology, any type of a time-related transition, but this is actually just talking about just a not implying time at all. It's just talking about just an issue of just an issue of addition, and that's basically just it. So الجمع دون دلالة التراخي. Okay, just like you ثم استوى على العرش. When you look at ثم استوى على العرش, you want to remember that is this talking about a certain time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't on the throne anyways? Well, that's something very critical to say, or at least very what is the word that I could use? Something that is perhaps something that would attract a lot of debate. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time, then certainly when we're speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being on the throne, to somehow interpret that thumma was telling me that the Lord Almighty was in a certain situation, and then we're speaking about time, then the Lord Almighty basically was on the throne, then we're speaking about something that is going to be very controversial right there, because the Lord Almighty is beyond time. And to somehow suspect or think that the Lord Almighty, yes, we're going to interpret it as somehow that it is time related, would actually put you at a very controversial debate right there with all the mutakallimin. So then you would just have to keep in mind that thumma is not always related to time, and sometimes it can be that just giving us an indication of basically a new addition, or giving us basically that information to tell us perhaps a process of something, and not necessarily implying time. Because remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. Because the second that you would even think of the universe created in 6 days, 6 days does not mean 6 days of earth time. So this isn't talking about 24 hours times 6. Okay, this is letting us know that there are 6 days, but what days are we talking about? Which days, which galaxy timing are we talking about? What are the 6 days? Are we talking about 2.3 billion years? Are we talking about, what days are we talking about? So far, we don't actually know which days and which let's say standard of days and counting that we're going to be using. But in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that it was 6 days. Maybe one day, I guess astrophysics can give us a better explanation of what this, in which 6 days, when we're studying studying the galaxies and how they were formed and etc. Perhaps one day they'll be able to give a better explanation. And who knows, is Big Bang thing? Who knows? So when we're talking about that thumma, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time, so just understand it that way. And of course, that's why a question like how old is God, or that doesn't make sense in the Muslim theology, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. So to ask about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's age, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, huwa al-awwal wal-akhir. He's the beginning and he's the last. Well, last doesn't mean that there's something after him. والأول ليس قبله شيء والآخر ليس بعده شيء. He's basically the first, there's nothing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's the last, and there's nothing after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time, so therefore trying to perhaps understand even qadar, trying to understand qadar and think, okay, well, if I, for example, do this act, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know about it? Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about it. But were you forced to do it? The answer is no, you weren't forced to do it. You were given the free will to do or not to do. If you had chosen to do it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. And because he is beyond time, for you would not be capable of knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, because you are confined within time. There's no way that we can have somehow, I guess, a time machine that's going to take you back in history. It's impossible. or a time machine that's going to take you into the future. It's impossible. Only the Lord Almighty can break or even be beyond time. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time. There's no way that we can create a time machine that can take us to the future or to the past whatsoever, because we are confined by qadar. We are confined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within time. There's absolutely no way, and it is absolutely impossible for us to, in any shape or form, go beyond time, because this is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is capable of seeing beyond time and knowing beyond time, because He's not confined in time. Therefore, when you're talking about time as a dimension of basically physics and in galaxies and all of that, you're talking about one of these dimensions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that هو الذي تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. But look at that one. خلق الموت والحياة. Wait a minute. خلق الموت? What do you mean خلق الموت? Yes, death is a creature. Death is a creature. That's why he said خلق الموت. الموت is a creature. Time is a creature. Time is a creature. So time, because it is a creature, but you want to keep in mind that creatures are not confined into perhaps something that moves about, at least in the same way that you might see a monkey move about. Okay? Because the whole thing about matter in motion, or different matters or different motions, whether we're speaking about the motion of the earth or motion of the space or galaxies or whatever it is, that's a creature. So whether we're speaking about the actual creation, or whether we're speaking about what results from the creation. Remember, when we speak about in surah, we always bring it up always. Let's go back to it. I think it's important to go back to it. Hold on, because this is key. So since we're talking about, hold on, what page is this? 158. We always go back to Surah Ash-Shura in this regards, and I always say Surah Ash-Shura in this regards is probably one of the key surahs in the key ayat, basically to help us understand the al-qadar, and help us understand how we relate to explaining and speaking about time. So let's go to Surah Ash-Shura really quick right there. Okay, now we're going to get to it. Hold on. Zukhruf right there. We're going to go a little bit right there in Fath. Oops. You know, sometimes when you're doing it with your cursor, I should actually remember the page, right? Ghafir, nope, it's going this way. And hold on. We're going to find it, inshallah. Fussilat, Shura right there. Here we go. Here we go. Let's look at this one. فاطر السماوات والأرض جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا. He created, and when you look at the word fatar, that basically means to split something. So he basically split what? Split the earth and the heavens and the earth. So we're talking about the different skies. Are we talking about galaxies? Is that what samawat actually means? Well, the word sama means anything that is above you. So if you are in a room, the ceiling is your sama. If you're outside, your sama is probably all those gases that are up above you. That's going to be your sama. If you are probably on the moon, then your sama is going to be other gases that are probably up above you. That's going to be your sama. Okay, so the word sama is in here, the word samawat is definitely letting us know that there are samawat. It's not just one, but there are different things that, is it layers of gases? Is it layers of different galaxies? Who knows what it is, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that you are nothing but a small particle right there in all of these creations, letting us know that Samawat and al-Ard are basically part of the creation. Keep that one in mind, because the word creation is extremely key here. We're going to see that this is a key word. جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا. He created created from you, basically the binary law and male, female, and even the binary rule in binary law, basically even in al-an'am, in different creatures, basically animal and perhaps mammals, probably animal kingdom, etc. يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِي, and made you dwell on the earth, basically. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. But the binary law, or the different laws as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created in the creation, you don't apply it on the creator. That's a key one. The creator is beyond all of that, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, to let us know that the laws that you would see governing in holding the world and the galaxies and all these different things around you, that you do not apply these laws on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he is beyond it. He's beyond all these laws. So if with your knowledge of the world, okay, if something is there, that means something put it there. If something is born, that means it had a father. If something is this, if something is, let's say, existing, if it's existing, that means it occupies a certain space. Okay, all the things that you had said would be true for the creation that you're living in, because the Lord Almighty is not a creature, he is the creator. So therefore, understanding that لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ is key to understanding that the laws that you would see in space, or the laws that you would see in creatures, that does not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So when you say, well, if it existed, that means it had a history. How did it get there? That means there's a beginning to it. Oh, that means there's an end. If there's a beginning, that means there's an ending to it. And all of these different things, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. You cannot apply these laws on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the same time, that does not mean that you would negate certain descriptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why he said, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He is the all-seeing, all-hearing, and letting you know. Remember those 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He's letting you know, well, I want you to go back to to go to those names in order to understand who your Lord Almighty is. And I don't want you to worship a remote God or a God that you don't know. So I'll give you 99 different descriptions in order for you to basically understand who the Lord Almighty is, who Ar-Razzaq is, who's really giving you the rizq, who's giving you life, who's giving you healing, who's giving you death, who's controlling everything, who's controlling the odds of defeat and victory, who's the beginning and who's the end, and what is all of this that we're seeing in this universe. So that's why you might see some of the names and attributes might seem contradictory, but they're actually to reflect encompassment. It's to let us know, since he is the one that brings life, he's also the one that brings death. So in other words, he controls all the different opposites that you see in this world. Well, we're not talking about just controlling the different things in terms of an actual substance or an actual matter, but even the motion of it. That's why he said, "Lahu maqalidu samawati wal ard." What is that to imply? "Lahu maqalidu samawati wal ard" is to also let me know that the function, that the motion, that the process, and basically the control of how things would get into a transition, a process, the matter and the motion of it, whether we're speaking about the matter, such as all of these, or whether we're speaking about the motion, all of that is basically controlled by the Lord Almighty. So what do you mean controlled by the Lord Almighty? If we're talking about maqalid samawati wal ard, you're talking about, okay, so the moon is rotating and the sun is rotating, and of course they're rotating at a certain basically motion. Is that the only thing that you're talking about? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that motion is not necessarily motion in taking and occupying a certain space and gradually moving to a new space. but there are different types of motions. There are different types of what puts these pieces together. In other words, understanding physics is probably just studying motion, how things would basically move. But that's not the only type of motion that controls things, but there's another type of movement that's happening, which is a rizq. A rizq. All these different things. What gives you the energy? What gives you life? What gives you death? What basically gives you perhaps the food, the marriage, whatever, the children, all of these different things. The things that you cherish, the prosperity and the happiness and health, all of that, that's all rizq. Who is actually giving you all of that, or who's taking it away? Who's taking it away? We just see it as it's happening. We just see it as, okay, it's something is taking place. It's basically some energy, some force, some power, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that this force, this power, this energy is all controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why he said, لِمَن يَشَاءُ وَيَقْدِرُ. So whether it's you, your neighbor, the cat next door, whatever it is all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. For he is basically all knowledge, all knowing with every single detail in the universe that you basically see. Going back to Thumma, just explaining this one. So when you see له مقاليد السماوات والأرض, that's more of a statement that's basically giving me an informative clause. But when you look at different details, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would let us know, for example, in the ayah, let's go, I think we had 158. Hold on, we're going to do it. 158. There we go. This is where we're at. Okay. Then you would see that thumma, for example, letting us know that there was within your life, that there was a certain history that relates to you of how things actually happened, whether how things were created or how the revelation happened and so forth. So now you see some of the things. Okay, now we get to see this one. And ثم استوى على العرش. And certainly here, not necessarily related to a timing, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond all. Let's see the other thumma right there. So now basically wanted us to compare between thumma and the letter fa. So you look at thumma, maybe we can make this one a little bit, no, I couldn't make it probably like this to make it something that you could see. Here we go. So we could see, so thumma and the wall. So you've got the letter wa, and you've got the letter fa, and you've got the letter thumma. Okay, so when you look at the letter wa, so if I were to say Hanya wa Umayya wa Bisharu came, that would basically mean we're just talking about a simple conjunction, no order. They just came. I didn't necessarily mean to put one name that this person came first. It was just a simple order. Okay, now yet for the fa, it's an immediate sequence. It's telling me, there's one person came, and then it's an immediate sequence. Person two came in, and number three, basically an immediate sequence. For the thumma, you could see a sequence with delay or elevation. So a thumma, you could say, is a little bit more complex because it doesn't always have to be related to time. Sometimes it can be as an elevation and telling me of something that this is more important or a priority to mention right there. Okay, what is the other thing? Number 6 is that thumma can sometimes be just a rhetorical of power. So can give me, I guess, an inference that there's a rhetorical power in telling me of whether showing gradual development or escalation, a serious escalation, or perhaps a conceptual distance or moral gravity, etc. So that's when, of course, you would say, let's see right there. So right there, تدرج في الخلق or تدرج في عظمة, تدرج in خطورة, or anything like that. So you could see, for example, just as in the ayah, ثم قست قلوبكم. ثم قست قلوبكم. Does that mean that this is talking about ثم قست قلوبكم, that this is talking about later time. It can suggest time. You will see the scholars sometimes debating the meanings. So you will see some scholars will say, well, this is giving me the inference that there is a time lapse, that perhaps when they had gotten so used to the sin that their hearts hardened and became so normalized with the sin that they later basically accepted it as if it was the right thing. And their hearts basically got so normalized with it. And perhaps you would say some scholars then debating. And one thing that I would like to say is that most of the books of tafsir, okay, most of the books of tafsir, you would see a lot of this debate, really on what is called ma'ani al-huruf. Ma'ani al-huruf. This is called the harf. I know in English you might use letter, you might use preposition. Okay, so this would be sometimes the area that they would debate about. Which category is it part of? Is it to indicate time? Is it to indicate danger? Is it to indicate moral shock? Is it to indicate perhaps the intents of something? What is it really to indicate? So they would, of course, this would be part of al-mutashabihat, and this is really important. What is al-mutashabih? Al-mutashabih is basically something that can carry more than one meaning. So homophones, I guess, something that can metaphors, and sometimes the homophones sometimes carry more than one meaning, and sometimes even carry more than one interpretation. And then the scholars of tafsir, they'll get into those debates and of what do we understand out of this? How do we understand? How do we explain this word or this preposition right there? So just an understanding, really quick. So it can mean temporal delay, conceptual or moral elevation, a discourse transition, and certainly telling us of a certain sequence. And later on, inshallah, we're going to get to giving other explanation, inshallah, for which one's right there. Hold on, let me see what this one's actually there. We're actually going to go for hal as well later on, because this is extremely important to explain the meaning of hal. Inshallah, we'll do that. We'll do that later on, inshallah, perhaps maybe even today. Let's go back to our Surah Al-An'am, so that we pretty much had really quick, just an overview of them for us to understand this piece of it. ثم آتينا موسى الكتاب تماما على الذي أحسن وتفصيلا. We went in details with that one. So let's see right there. Al-Qurtubi wanted to say ثم آتينا موسى, and he said ثم is basically maf'ulan. So what does that mean? Atayna, what was he given? So he was given basically two objects. Two subjects actually. Okay, Musa was the one that was given, and what was he given? Well, he was given al-kitab, and it was tamama. It was basically as a completion to bring about a completion for what? For those that على الذي أحسن وتفصيلا. And this is, there's an inference here that if a person were to live up to a certain level of righteousness, that is only when they're capable of working out more. Okay, what does that mean? So let's do it this way. If a person is struggling with their salah, to tell them about Qiyam al-Layl is definitely not right. They're already struggling with their basics of salah. And not until they master the 5 daily prayers are they really going to be capable of being consistent with perhaps the adding extra work or extra ways of getting farther higher, at least higher in their righteous acts. Okay, let's give another example. If we're talking about ibadat, in general, it's a lot easier to see. If a person is basically fasting, let's say Mondays, Thursdays, the white days, they're doing all of these, then they're going to be capable of constraining at least their desires in a stronger way because they had been practicing. They had been practicing for a pretty long time in their own simple days, Mondays to Thursdays and white days and all of these different things. And that was making a practice. All of that practice gave them the empowerment of having a stronger resistance, a stronger resilience, perseverance, that I'm going to stay committed. This practice basically gets them into another position in their faith because they had been putting in a lot of perseverance, a lot of resilience. And then they'll be capable of constraining, or at least they'll be capable of controlling their drives than their drives controlling them. So it works this way. So when you see تماما على الذي أحسن, you would basically get an inference that the ones that were still struggling with the Ten Commandments, they're not going to be capable of going to stage 2, which basically contains perhaps a lot more instructions, a lot more directions, and perhaps a lot more maybe restrictions even. They're not going to get to there because the Torah was definitely getting more tafsila. There were more directions. There were certainly a lot more details than what perhaps the Ten Commandments carried. So certainly those that didn't make it, they didn't pass the Ten Commandments, they weren't going to be the ones to be fully capable of embracing the Torah and embracing the revelation. So if a person, for example, is struggling perhaps with, let's say, salah, or struggling with hijab, or struggling with maybe reading Quran, or struggling with certain righteous acts, what is that going to entail? What is that going to suggest? Well, that's going to suggest that they are basically struggling because another sin is basically dragging them. What sin is dragging? And that's when, you have great shuyukh that would come in and letting us know and mentor us and say, well, if you're basically doing ikhtilat and you're going around men, you're definitely going to find it harder to wear your hijab. Why? Because to you, you're enjoying getting attraction, you're enjoying getting, those guys perhaps recognizing your presence. And certainly as a female, what you look for is social acceptance. And you see that showing off your body or etc., that you're getting the social acceptance. So therefore, that's going to be a lot harder to embrace hijab because your mind is dragged there. Your mind is basically living within that type of caging. Why did we call it caging? We call it caging because you're basically letting your drives control you, not the principle. So for a Muslim is basically giving themselves the freedom by not getting controlled by their drives or by other people's drives. So you would see when this ayah was letting us know, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Do not approach the sins, whether we're speaking about apparent sins. Apparent sin could be, taking people's stuff, maybe stealing, maybe hitting somebody, etc. All of that, that's مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. مَا بَطَنَ, on the inside, envying somebody, on the inside. You probably just hate that person. You're probably, seeing them as less than you because they, who knows, maybe come from a different country or maybe come from a different social status or whatever it is. And you start thinking of yourself as somehow you are better. Now, here's that arrogance right there. And that's basically ما بطن الفواحش ما بطن. Not until the person is really growing in their application, in their discipline, are they really going to be capable of living up to the revelation. So now this is key. Is this necessarily talking about the Torah itself? No, this isn't necessarily. Well, in this ayah, yes, but this isn't exclusive to the Torah because the paradigm is the same. So even when it comes to Sunnah, for example, even when it comes to Quran, and even when it comes to Islam, it's the same thing. That if the person is struggling to apply the obligatory practices, then certainly they're not going to be achieving, and they're not going to be successful in adding and growing higher in being part of those perhaps salihin, perhaps muttaqin, perhaps mu'mineen, perhaps salihin, or perhaps maybe muhsinin. That's a different stage. And you don't jump up by just simply just going up. You have to basically fight against your own gravity. If you wanted to jump, in order to jump, you basically have to duck down and fight against your own gravity. And the higher you want to go up, you end up needing to duck down even further. If it's a small jump, you're probably just going to, just make a slight kneel. But if you want to jump way higher up, you got to make sure that you are bending way farther to the ground. In other words, you're fighting against your own gravity. And that's the same thing. When we're talking about gravity, we're not just talking about as in physics, but we're talking about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, أخلد إلى الأرض. And that's that word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أخلد إلى الأرض. What is أخلد إلى الأرض? It's like they really sink into earth. What do you mean really sink into earth? Well, definitely it's metaphorical, but this isn't, really sink into earth where somehow, they started, going into this quicksand of earth. No, this isn't talking about it like that, but this is to give us like a metaphor that if you let your own body, your own desires, your own pleasures basically control you, guess what? Your body is what is going to decompose. It's earth. You decompose. What do you become? Well, you become basically earth. So if that person just lived their life just to please their own body, that means technically they are just pleasing basically something that is going to decompose into nothing but an earth, nothing but dust. So they are really thinking that, hey, I'm getting somewhere, I'm feeling pleasure, I'm happy, etc. All of this is going to be very temporary, and then therefore its impact, its this happiness is not long term. It's just going to be very temporary, and therefore أخلد إلى الأرض. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that really this person is just sinking into more and deeper into earth. So therefore, in order to not sink into earth and to go into the heavens, of course, as all of this is metaphorical, but to go and get elevated, you basically need to do what? Well, you need to let go of those desires. And the farther you basically let go of these desires, you are going to see that your body is not going to have the full control over you. And then it's basically getting the soul to work in power now. So think of it as, you've got, maybe we could do it this way. Let's see if we can draw this. Okay, you've got, here we go, here's a cup, and here's a cup, and here's a cup. I mean, that's an easy thing to draw, right? That's the body, and you've got, this is the soul, and you've got, this is the mind, and you've got, this is the heart, okay? So you've got one basically cup right there, and you've got a certain amount of water in it. Okay. If you pour it all in here, then you won't have enough to pour in here. Okay. And if you basically pour it all in here, then you're not going to be having enough to pour it in here. So what are you supposed to do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why he said, شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا وَالَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically let us know that there's a sharia that is what? That is صِرَاطِ مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوا. That's mustaqima. So what is mustaqim? Mustaqim as in path, and mustaqim that it basically is giving you the right amount that you need for your body, the right amount that you need for your soul, the right amount that you need for your mind, the right amount that you need for your heart as well. That's surat mustaqima. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the right amount, but here's one thing. It doesn't mean that it's the right amount for all the same way, because the right amount that you need for the body might actually be just needing about up to here. So it'll basically give you the right amount of halal and haram, and basically the right amount to help you get to the necessary number for, let's say, of your body, the necessary number for your ruh, the necessary number for, or at least whether in terms of information or whether in terms of perhaps mental health, etc. It basically has its own numbering for each and every single one. So Sharia comes in basically لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ هُدًى وَرَحْمَةٍ. It basically is to give you every single thing. When you look at every single thing, what are we talking about? لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Are we talking about لِكُلِّ practice? Are we talking about لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ as in, hey, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ for your body, for your mind? What really is the numbering for it? How much of body do I have to give? How much of focus on my body do I have to give? What is the right amount that is considered as fulfilled, or this is extra? What is the right amount of prayer, or is there a certain amount? Is there a level that I'm going to say this is too much? Well, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, yeah, certainly, even when you're talking about spirituality, there's a certain amount that is considered فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever basically goes away from my sunnah, then they're not from me. So in other words, even when we're talking about spirituality, are you going to, let's say, abstain from marriage because you want to somehow purify yourself and etc.? Well, no, that's فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Are you going to abstain from engaging in everything in life? No. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Are you going to be fasting every single فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي, etc.? So then, therefore, when you look at لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ هُدًى وَرَحْمَةٍ, you need to basically know the right amount for each and every single thing. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a tafseel. Maybe we could erase that one in order for us to really see it, right? Here we go. We're just going to erase it really quick. And we're going to be using, here we go. So tafseelan. Tafseelan basically means details. The details of what numbers are we talking about? How much do I have to fill for this and that and so forth? And certainly تفصيلا لكل شيء, for each and every single thing. وهدى. What is الهدى? الهدى basically means guidance. What is guidance? So guidance means the knowledge of, one, we're talking about purpose. Why were you created? So that's the purpose that preceded your existence. Okay? Number one, that's one side of huda, but that's not the only thing, because huda also means what is expected of me in order to get to the purpose. So I understood that I have to get to Jannah, and I understood that I was created for a purpose, which is that there's Judgment Day. How do I get there? So that's basically that guidance. That's the second piece of guidance. Guidance is to give me the direction of how to get to the purpose. Number three is basically huda, to stay لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ, to stay basically within the path. How do I maintain this direction? It's not enough to know the destination, but you also need the direction to get to the destination. It's not enough to get to know the direction to the destination, but I need to know the right amount of fuel needed for me to get that far? And where are those areas of probably maybe getting fuel or maybe getting, I don't know, resting stations? What are those areas? So that's basically necessary in order for me to get to my final destination. So it's not enough to know the destination. You need the direction. You also need to recognize the capacity and the capacity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you and how you could use it in order to get to the destination. You need all these different things. That's al-huda. So putting that, getting out of the metaphor and making it as a practical thing, al-huda is to explain to me the purpose for your existence is basically to get to Yawm al-Qiyamah. Get to Jannah. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Okay, now this is يَعْبُدُون. That's basically the direction. Direction, لِيَعْبُدُون. Now this is the direction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُون. Al-ibadah is basically not necessarily exclusive to ritual, but al-ibadah is anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of you, whether we're speaking about social transactions, perhaps ritual, and the different lists of different things that relate to you, psychological even. How do I control all these areas to make them submit to the Lord Almighty? That's ibadah. So al-ibadah basically means submitting yourself, whether you're submitting your body, whether you're submitting your will, your own will, your choices and what you want to choose, or whether you're submitting basically the decisions or submitting your money, submitting all these different things basically to be in accordance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen. شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا. Here we go. So now, the other piece is that, remember the ayah, what does it say in Surah al-Dhariyat? Should we go to it really quick? The ayah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Let's go to it really quick. Let's hope we find it really fast. This is Surah al-Infitar. Al-Hadid, no, we're going to go Surah al-Dhariyat. Hold on. Surah al-Qamar, we're getting really close. That way you can see it, right? Dhariyat, right there you go. Here it is. Let's see. Here we go. This is the ayah. وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Let's see that one, right? Sorry, here we go. وَذَكِّرْ, and remind them, for the reminder benefits the believers. Okay, what is the reminder? What are we supposed to be remembering? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I had only created the jinn and the humans to worship the Lord Almighty. ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون. All that potential, all that capacity, all that energy that they were given. So that's why you said, what did we say? We said you've got al-huda is to tell you the direction, is to tell you the purpose, is to tell you about your potentials. Here it is, this ayah right there, telling you, well, ما أريد منهم من رزق. Your capacity, your energy, your potentials are basically ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not wanting you to put your energy and invest your energy in getting a job and probably making millions and millions of dollars, as what Trump likes to say. It's not an issue of somehow making all that number of perhaps getting a job or probably, trying to achieve a certain thing, buying a house, a car, whatever it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, listen, I didn't create you in order to be a force of energy to get some achievement of just trying to get money, trying to get a house, trying to get a car. That's not what you were created for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, listen, you basically have a purpose, and the purpose is certainly not to expand in your dunya. وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَن يُطْعِمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asking you to basically just get food and water and all of that. إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَالرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you and letting us know, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَالرَّزَّاقُ. He's the one that's a razaq. So in terms of your energy and your force, recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to give a rizq, is the one to basically be ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. He's the most powerful one. Why remind me of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power in this statement? It's basically to let you know that you may want the world to head towards a certain destination, but you don't control it. You don't control the world, and not even your life, and you don't control the destination, you don't control the direction, but you can basically understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in nature, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in the world, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created basically in this universe that you live in. So you don't have the power to change things, at least changing in how this world is running, but you do have the responsibility to adapt to, number two, to change certain things within a certain force that basically falls under the submission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see, if you see the world, for example, you see people not doing what is right, you have the responsibility to basically guide people to live in accordance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system. So letting us know الشريعة مصلحة كلها. That's what Ibn al-Qayyim said. He said Sharia is all about fulfilling the interests of people. Whenever Sharia is not fulfilling an interest and it's basically at odds with human interest, that's when we know that that isn't Sharia, that's absurdity. If it goes against human interest, if it is causing harm, that's not Sharia. It's that simple. Sharia is all about maximizing good. Sharia is all about maximizing human interest. Sharia is all about maximizing basically your benefit as an individual in the society. Well, that doesn't mean that we would be myopic in how we would see what our interests are. We would have to go back to the Quran and Sunnah in order to make sure that we're not myopic, that we're not narrow in our perspective and seeing right now my interest is to build a house, to get a job. Yes, get a job at a bank. Yeah, it's hiring and it's giving me a good opportunity to maximize my money. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, I don't want you to be very narrow in your vision and just think of now. Maximizing good is basically maximizing within the perspective of seeing that there is that certain destination that you're supposed to be getting to. And that's basically al-akhirah. So that's why you look at this one when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَفْصِيلًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً. What is al-rahmah? That's to let us know that certainly Sharia, yes, it is about giving you direction. It's about giving you the recognition of the different energy, the different forces, the different capacities, potentials that you have. But it's also not asking you more than what you can handle. Sharia is not asking you more than what you can handle. Whether that was the Sharia of Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallam, or whether that was the Sharia of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, it was always coming in as rahmah. لَعَلَّهُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ. What is it supposed to get to? The final destination. What is the final destination? لِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And what is لَعَلَّهُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ? What is the meaning of لَعَلَّ? We're gonna, tomorrow, inshallah, we're gonna bring about the different meanings of لَعَلَّهُمْ. لَعَلَّ. What does لَعَلَّ mean? Just like when we looked at ثُمَّ, لَعَلَّ also has multiple meanings. Is it always for hope? Is it always to give me a transition? What does it really mean when we say لَعَلَّهُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ? Is it trying to take me to a certain destination? So we're going to see لَعَلَّ tomorrow, inshallah. بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ. What is بِلِقَاء? بِلِقَاء means meeting. اللقاء
When you meet somebody, you basically encounter them. So when we're speaking about a day of encountering, a day of meeting, a day where there is no, as in Hadith Adi ibn Hatim, when the Prophet ﷺ actually tells Adi ibn Hatim that there's going to be a day when you would meet your Lord Almighty, لَيْسَ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ تُرْجُمَانٌ, where there would be no interpreter between you and your Lord Almighty. And that's why he said, yu'minun. But here's another inference that we would get out of this ayah. So, okay, this is talking about that all of this, whether we're speaking about tafsila, whether we're speaking about the details of the scripture, or whether we're speaking about the guidance, or whether we're speaking about the mercy, all of that, where is it taking me? It's taking me so that you would meet your Lord Almighty. With what? With faith. Because if you don't meet your Lord Almighty with faith, then كلا بل ران على قلوبهم ما كانوا يكسبون. And then what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us? Well, those people that basically had their hearts just so fixated on their dunya, what happens on Judgment Day? Well, they're on Judgment Day, they're away, mahjubun, away from the face or seeing the face of their Lord Almighty. So in other words, there's no communication going to be between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they're going to be distant. They're not going to somehow, when you, for example, you are going through certain trouble, then you would say, what if I were to talk to maybe the manager? Maybe I can convince the manager, etc. Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that these people, they're not going to have the chance to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know لعلهم بلقاء ربهم يؤمنون. So basically applying الهدى and the Sharia itself, whether it is Sharia Muhammad ibn Abdullah or Musa alayhi salam, because it comes from the same foundation. So what is that supposed to take them to? It's basically to help them grow in their faith. So whatever you apply in Sunnah, whether you apply in Salah, or whatever you apply in, it could be just something that, well, I gave up on let's say, perhaps riba, and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically said it was haram. You may not see the implication of it, but it will have an effect on your children. It will have an effect on you, will have an effect. Same thing when the Prophet ﷺ actually said, مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. No money is deducted from sadaqah. Wait a minute, but I actually see it right there. What do you mean it wasn't deducted? He said, no, well, there's a different value. If you see values in terms of numbers, then yes, definitely, you donated $100, you had $600, now they're 500. There's no question about that. But the Prophet is telling you, but what you don't recognize is that the $100 that you had invested in a donation, this $100, it basically went to another type of an elevation for you. And this elevation is basically another type of value that is even of a higher value than the $100 that were paid. And that's why he said, مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. A true donation, a sincere donation, it didn't actually lessen the amount of value that you have, but in fact, it increased it. And that's the same thing when you talk about the different things that you may give up on. Perhaps you gave up on a certain job because there's a lot of ikhtilat in it. Or perhaps you gave up on a certain choice of a place to live in. Or perhaps maybe you gave up on a certain, maybe a good potential candidate to be a husband. He had the money, he had this, but he doesn't even pray. You know what? I'm going to give up on this person, even though he was a great candidate. But because of my dunya, my deen, I'm going to give up on this candidate. So in that situation, what did you do? You basically are selling your dunya to buy al-akhirah. You're selling your dunya to buy your akhirah, you're going to see all of this would basically enforce one another and enhance one another, and basically that would lead them to iman. وَهَذَا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مُبَارَكٌ فَاتَّبِعُوهُ وَاتَّقُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Tomorrow, we're going to do a couple things, inshallah. Inshallah. Remember, we did say inshallah last time, and we still got sick and for a whole week, but that's okay. Remember, inshallah doesn't mean we want it to happen. It just means inshallah bi'idhnillah. Okay. وَهَذَا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مُبَارَكٌ. We're going to do the meaning of لَعَلَّ. Okay. And we're also going to do the meaning of hal. Wait a minute. Is it here? Oh, no, not yet. Not yet. The meaning of la'alla. Oh, I guess I prepared in advance right there, but inshallah, the meaning of la'alla. And we're also going to be doing the tafsir for this. I know a sister asked a question and she said, what days are these? So this is basically, if you're living in the US, this is every Monday till Friday. Monday till Friday. Okay. And yeah, and then Saturday, Saturday or your Friday night. Yeah, your Friday night and Sunday night, that would be the fiqh one. We're doing the fiqh of divorce right now. Well, fiqh of marriage / fiqh of divorce, etc. So we're doing that piece of it. And inshallah, we continue with the tafsir. And if there are any questions, inshallah, we'll be answering them. But there's definitely a lot more to say. We're really close. This is going to be basically the following pages, the last page for Surah Al-An'am. And inshallah, right after it, we'll be doing Surah Al-A'raf. Even if you weren't there for Surah Al-An'am from the beginning, don't worry about it. You started today, just continue with us. You don't have to start from the beginning. You could start from now, because alhamdulillah, I do repeat. And I repeat for a reason, because I do recognize that people are not necessarily taking notes. So I may repeat to make sure that everybody understands it. And because, of course, the ayat themselves, they basically relate to one another. So you will see some repetition taking place and certain details that might have been said here, not said elsewhere. So we basically connect the dots together. Our mission is to complete, inshallah, the whole Quran. We are right now, I know this is the 8th juzu, but we had already done almost 3 juzu before. 3 ajza before, so you can see those. We had done Surah Al-Kahf before, Furqan, was it Taha, Shu'ara. We didn't complete Surah Al-Shu'ara. There was an amount that we didn't complete it, so we'll work on it as well. We had done which other surahs? A couple other surahs. They add up almost 3 other ajza. So alhamdulillah, we continue every day, at least Monday through Thursday, Friday. Anyhow, you'll always have a class. Only one day there's no class, which is Sunday, basically. Well, my Sunday, your Saturday. Yeah. So this is it. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. You can unmute yourselves and go ahead, my friends. And I'll give you, I guess, a few